Okay, we're passed. We're about 2-minute warning.
Test.
Hold on, we're waiting for the chief. She'll be here in just a minute.
She's lopsided. She's missing a scar.
Uh-oh, uh-oh.
On one shoulder. You need us to be any tighter?
That's perfect.
Jake, you might as well get in here too.
Jake, you might have questions, sure.
We'll balance this out.
So good afternoon. I'm Mendocino County Sheriff Tom Allman. Investigator Jake Slates from the California Highway Patrol. Acting Chief Elizabeth Barkley, thank you very much for being here. The presenter of the Coroner's Inquest, Matthew Guichard, and the California Highway Patrol Commander for this area, Bruce Carpenter. 374 days ago is when our county experienced 8 lives lost on the rugged and basically unforgiving coast of Mendocino County. Literally thousands of hours of investigation and searching have gone in the last year to come to the conclusion that we heard today. There are certainly many government agencies that have been involved, many search and rescue agencies that have spent the thousands of hours, volunteer hours, trying to recover every body possible, and we certainly know at this point Devontae is still outstanding. Over the last 2 days, the known facts have been provided to a jury, which I'm very appreciative of the jury of 14 citizens hearing known facts. The jury had the ultimate responsibility of determining the manner of death for each of the 8 people who died on that fateful day. As the coroner of this county, I will accept the jury's decision and certainly rule the manner of death as was decided, and I want to clarify that so there's no confusion. The death certificates for Jennifer and Sarah Hart will be listed as suicide. And the 6 children who perished on that day, their death, certainly as a jury ruled, was determined to be at the hands of another, other by accident, and their death certificates will list homicide as the manner of death. While the sheriff's office is closing our investigation, I ask that our federal lawmakers review the facts of this case. I've spoken personally with my Congressman Jared Huffman. I encourage others who are stakeholders to acquaint themselves with the lack of federal oversight of allegations of child abuse. a national database should be considered. The Hart family was hopefully resting in peace. The tragedy of the 6 children murdered should never be forgotten. Our society is often too busy to forget the sanctity of life, and we're experiencing that now. I thank the jury for being willing to sit on the inquest, listen carefully to the difficult testimony, and render an appropriate decision. To the Clark County Sheriff's Office, to the California Highway Patrol, and to the Westport and Fort Bragg Fire Departments, I thank you. I thank you for your professionalism and assistance, and to members of my team, Cindy, and to Lieutenant Barney, and certainly to Jared Cheney, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for your dedication. To Matt Guichard and to Tim Biggs, the presenters over the last 2 days, we thank you for bringing the absolute experience and knowledge and professionalism to assist us. In closing, and there will be questions, I'm certainly aware of a contingent of citizens who have a belief that Devontae was not in the car. To those, and to all, the Sheriff's Office would certainly welcome any information that would prove our belief incorrect. It is our opinion and the jury's opinion that he lived with his family, and unfortunately, he perished with his family. So to the Highway Patrol, the captain had something to say.
Good afternoon. Bruce Carpenter with the CHP out of Ukiah. I just want to reiterate some of the things that the sheriff has already stated. I want to thank our investigators for the hard work that they put in. They put in many, many hours into this investigation. And I just want to say our hearts go out to the Hart family. We've spoken to them on numerous occasions, and they're heartbroken, as you can imagine, over this tragedy. So I do want to thank our allied partners as well. There was a lot of work done by a lot of people here to make this happen. And I will also say thank you to the jury, because we feel that, as the sheriff has stated, that the findings they found in this case are correct based on the evidence that was presented over the last couple of days in this process. So again, thank you for covering this, and I'll just step aside. I'm just babbling now, but thank you for being here and covering this case, and thank you to everybody that was a part of this investigation. Thank you.
Chief?
Really, to follow up on thanking everybody, the coroner's inquest, I want to thank the sheriff personally for that process. I think in this case and in cases like this, there's an absolute need to kind of be very forthcoming with the facts. And since there's no prosecution in cases like this, it gives closure to those people who are closest to the Hart family, to certainly the investigators who have all been impacted by the loss of such, life, especially when it comes to children. And I want to thank the sheriff for calling the inquest, and for the hearing officer taking his time to participate, in the jurors. I think it's important for the community, and I think it's important for healing and moving forward. So, and thank you all for your participation when we reached out looking for these children and putting the facts together. Certainly the press and the media and all those who knew the Hart family played a critical role in helping us better understand how we came here today. So thank you. You probably have the bulk of the questions. So.
Good evening, and thank you so much for showing up. And again, we appreciate you guys covering this, because as everyone has stated here today, that this was not a minor event, and this was a huge ordeal. And our hearts do go out with the Hart family at this point, and that we hope and pray that they will soon be able to start the healing process over this. So with that,
Are there questions?
any questions?
One question I had is, there was in the Oregon report, a report of a payment posting to Sarah's credit card in the early mornings of the 26th. And I was just wondering if you found out anything more about that, of how much it was for, if it was an auto pay or not.
Honestly, I hadn't heard of that until you just asked the question. So at this point, once we ran those financial records and stuff, that was at the point in time that we ran them. So I don't know of anything that would indicate what it was or how much it was for.
I'd like to follow up on the financial question. What has been the financial burden of this investigation and the inquest to Mendocino County, and which budget units have been affected?
As far as the financial impact on the investigation, I'm not prepared to answer that. There are so many agencies involved. I believe Investigator Slates spoke of 11 law enforcement agencies. As far as the coroner's inquest itself, the budget unit for the coroner's office of Mendocino County is going to assume the responsibility of this, and it's been budgeted at $40,000. And in my opening remarks, I skipped a page, and I apologize. There's people, the blood relatives and the adopted relatives of the entire family, of Sarah, of Jennifer, and the children. Those are the people who I certainly want to tell you that our hearts are with you. And the proceedings over the last 2 days may have not been pleasant, may have been painful, but our investigators have done everything possible to obtain the truth of the matter. And the truth of the matter, as unpleasant as some of the facts were the truth of the matter. And that one of the reasons of the sheriff's office having the coroner's inquest was to present as much facts as possible to a jury. But to the family members, adopted and blood relatives, we're very, very sorry for your loss. Questions?
Yeah, in all of this case, where do you find to be like the major systematic failures on what agency's part of, that could have played a part in perhaps doing something different so this would never have happened?
I appreciate that question. Where are the systematic failures that possibly could have prevented this? We have a national database that reports mental illness if someone's been confined to a mental health hospital, which prohibits them from having guns. We have a national database for criminal histories. When someone is arrested or is going for a job, they can find out if people can find out if there's been a conviction. We also have a national database for gun registration. We do not have a national database for child abuse allegations. And the fact that there were 5 states involved, Texas, Minnesota, Oregon, Washington, California, certainly should be an enlightening moment for our national legislatures to look at the possibility of enacting some type of national database which would allow the CPS workers to have easy access instead of a long investigation. And I commend the Oregon CPS workers who did find the information in Minnesota. But for the other states, if someone didn't spend the extra time in that extra effort, then this wouldn't have found out. And so while I'm not going to say if we had a national database, that the Hart family would still be alive, but certainly there would have been more of an investigation and find out if the adoptions had been appropriate or if CPS should be a little bit more involved in what they were. Thank you for that question.
So does this mean that the case is officially closed and that the search for Devontae is over?
The Mendocino County Sheriff's Office is closing our investigation pending any additional information on both Hannah and Devontae.
What were you hoping to accomplish with this inquest, and do you feel like you accomplished it?
The desire we had for holding an inquest, and the last time Mendocino County had an inquest was 1967. The sheriff was Reno Bartolome. We have not had an inquest in 52 years, and what I was hoping to accomplish with this inquest, because everyone perished and we were not going to have any kind of criminal proceeding, is that the information could come out. The loss of 8 lives in one single fraction of a moment should shock anybody. And for anyone to question whether or not we should have an inquest at the loss of 8 lives, I would debate them to say that when 6 children and 2 adults die in one incident, we as society need to know the facts of that case. That was accomplished over the last 2 days. Yes, ma'am?
I would agree with you that it's definitely shocking and it's really heartbreaking, and I appreciate what you were saying about needing more oversight and, connection in terms of CPS and that sort of thing. But from my perspective, that's kind of the end of the line. I mean, I feel like the families who lose their kids and have to, or they're taken away or give them up, that family's broken. The system for getting them into foster care is broken. And then a lot of the adoptive families become broken because there's not very much support and services easy to access. And then the CPS, that's kind of the end of the line of what I see as a whole broken chain and what happens to kids that do not have functioning, stable, safe families. And my great wish for this, to help conclude all of the efforts that all of you have done, to bring awareness and resources to that chain, not just the end of it, but the needs all along that kids and families have.
It wasn't a question, it was a statement, but let me clarify your question with that. And you asked why we're having this. Certainly, it would have been very easy for the Mendocino County Sheriff's Office to end the investigation as the paperwork was coming in. But then the question came up, if we didn't do this, if we didn't bring the attention of 5 states and the CPS allegations from one state to another and so forth, who would? And while it's not the Sheriff's Office's sole responsibility to bring all of this to light, I felt personally that it was, as a coroner of this county, it was my responsibility to bring as much information together over the 5-state family trail and bring it to light to the public.
This is for Officer Slate. You had mentioned that Sarah was performing the Google searches, or at least Google searches were being performed on Sarah's phone for roughly 18 hours. And I wondered, if you could talk about the progression of searches, if there was any, at what point did suicide become a topic, or was it constant throughout those 18 hours?
Well, it was fairly constant throughout the hours. One thing we did realize is that maybe the questions remain the same, but slightly different in one way or another. And what we were talking about during the inquest was just pretty much a sample of each of those questions at that point.
Was there some reason that a lot of this information and some of the evidence was kept private until the inquest?
Certainly. We in August, when I first met Matthew Shea and Tim Biggs, we discussed the need to have a coroner's inquest. And the evidence that we were getting at that time was somewhat piecemeal. We certainly agreed that it was an appropriate time to have a coroner's inquest at least a year after the incident, especially with the fact that Devontae's body has not been found yet. And if we're going to have a coroner's inquest, we wanted to present the evidence all at once, because the fact of releasing some evidence piecemeal certainly would cause for rumors and allegations to arise, and we wanted it all presented at once. Any other questions?
Yes, this is for Officer Slate. I was wondering if you found any evidence of mental illness on the part of either of these mothers.
None of the medical records were researched at that point. Again, our search was mostly to establish a quick background of what was going on, and then what led us to the point of this tragic event happening. We were mostly focused on, trying to locate the missing children throughout this entire investigation, along with the fact that, we were trying to get an overall picture of what happened leading up to this point.
I have a question. I was wondering if, I guess for the point that the verdict has been announced, or any time during your investigation you contacted the families, the biological families of any of the kids, to let them know what you found and what happened?
Good.
Lieutenant Barney's in the room. He can certainly address that question, and as he's coming up here with that question of mine, I appreciate the question about records, about mental illness and records and so forth. Records are something very important, and the adoption records, let me talk about the adoption records. The adoption records in Texas, from a private adoption agency. The private adoption agency has gone out of business, and those records were not available. And so when I talked about federal oversight, certainly there's a need at the federal level when an adoption agency, a private adoption agency goes out of business, that those records are certainly, they should be mandated to go to some government entity where they can be researched later. But Lieutenant Barney can answer that question.
So the actual family members that we talked to one of the maternal grandmothers of Hannah and her daughter, which was Hannah's mother. We've had multiple conversations with her leading up to the DNA sample submission that she volunteered to do, and then some other background information that was needed in the case to compare our samples to get a positive ID. I have heard that other family members from the other siblings have reached out, but they haven't reached out to our department, so I don't know if that's true or not. But we would welcome any kind of conversation they want to have. You know, we would like to be open and kind of upfront with them with what's happened to their offspring as well.
Can officers like talk a little bit about how long it's been since they had real contact with their biological, Sarah and Jen had contact with their families back in the Midwest?
So Sarah and Jennifer years ago had cut off all communication with their parents. Some of it was, depending on the family member and stuff, it might have been as most recent as like 2 to 3 years ago, and as far as 17 years.
And why? Why did they cut off contact?
So that's going into information that is real personal to the family, and I don't feel that we should, discuss that information right now.
Anything else?